Okay, so I think we can start now. The first point I want to discuss about is governance and ownership of a design system. Um, that's one of the important things that you need to think about in any design system, right? Be it small or large. So, how do you establish governance structures within enterprises to ensure consistency and evolution of design systems across various teams and projects? So, anyone wants to get started on that?
Okay. So I would break governance into two parts. One is people, and the other one is tools. So you can't just keep on building something and then leave it on its own. So first, around people. So governance is more around how you can set, like in the end, we are building systems so that it becomes easier for other teams to build things at ease, and not the other way around where we build things and they are frustrated, right? Because in the end, we are dealing with designers and developers. So how do we make their jobs easier? And in doing so, of course, like the normal workflow where a designer or a developer builds anything, they have a lot of dependencies on say product or different backend teams. If I talk about front end engineers, designers would have dependency on what the product needs. Now in doing so, they also now have a dependency on a different team, which is design system, right? Now imagine that they have a system where they want some use case to be solved, but it's not solved. So how do we set some practices where we have like inclusive forums where these designers can raise their voices? We have places where they can go ahead and start raising their requirements, and we make sure that the design system teams, they have like a good turnaround time. It can't be that someone raised a request that, okay, I need I need an enhancement in say a modal component, and that is being tackled, let's say, after so many months. There has to be like a turnaround time, and when you set turnaround time, the team, which is design system team, has to be accountable for that. So that is around and there are a lot of processes. This is around how you can have quicker turnaround time. Second is how easier you can make uh, ways so that people can raise issues. It has to be more of an inclusive forum where, let's say, if you are also building a new component, you are also involving your partner teams, because design system is like a product where you need collaboration from different teams. But if they are not involved, then you can't expect them to start consuming the system. So the processes around that could be that when you are building a system, this is what we do at Razorpay. When you are building, let's say, any component, we do like a we call it like a designer advocates forum, where once we have a proposal ready, we invite people or representatives from each team or each product. So we have different eyes who can have different varied inputs as well. So that is from people perspective. From tools perspective, when I talk about governance, say in the end someone used a component, but did they use it correctly or not? Can you build a tool around that could tackle or fix those problems there and there itself? Like for example, um, a designer who's building an interface, they are handing it off to developer, but that, like, the design that is being handed over to the developer is probably not using the design system to its, like, in a correct form. For example, a button component which your brand guideline said that it's of a particular color and of a particular shape. Say it had border radius of 2 pixel, and it had, let's say, a left right padding of 12 pixel, but for some reason the designer found that it is not working out. They kind of detached it. Now when that gets handed over to the dev, uh, the developer is left clueless, because there would be a problem in the end product that the developer is shipping, and then the developer would be put on spot that, okay, what happened? So how can we enable, say, designers, because let's say whatever tool they are using, Figma is the most prominent tool. So can we do something where before they hand off the designs to the developers, they can have something, um, like we derive this analogy from dev, which is a linter kind of a thing, where you can run a plugin which acts as a linter on your design, and it kind of tells you that, okay, this is something that maybe accidentally you didn't intend to do it, but this is what is broken, and probably you should avoid it. So this is governance from my point of view.
Really good points. I think what you said about making things easier for all the product teams, that really matters. And I think that's one of the main end goals of a design system, to have better adoption among the organization. So, yeah,
So
Abhijit.
he mostly covered it all, but he put it quite well. So that the people component, I agree, and even I follow that in with my team and other stakeholders. That people component has to be very strong. So that and other thing is that the design system which has been made, right, and the guidelines that has been made, that has to be followed to the T, and so that has to be integrated as a as a religion, so that what has been made, it has to be followed without any any diversion, or without any fail. Because one thing in which what I have found is that um, by someone takes one liberty of like deleting all, just altering 1 pixel or 2 pixels, and that actually leads, and it builds and builds and builds, and later when we see something that's like completely something different. So stakeholders and needs to be there, and they need to be accountable for what's being followed and what's not being followed. And design systems are built and at the very on all different stages with a lot of different teams involved, right? And at the end, when what we have is something which everyone agrees on, that's why it has been built and put in place. So to and that has to be followed, and that has to be made sure that everyone follows to and that governance has to be there, in my experience too.
Right, right, yeah. So to avoid deviation like that, we have certain models defined which prevent that, right? So there is one more aspect that comes for this is defining clear ownership of components, guidelines, and the overall design system within large enterprises with distributed teams. So do you have any opinions on defining ownership like that? Yep. So about the same thing, like governance. If you are talking about governance, you said that it is very important to avoid deviations, and I think there would be certain models defined in this governance model which prevent people from making such mistakes, which would lead to more problems later. Um, I think that also ties down to ownership, right? Like who takes care of such stuff?
So yeah, I mean, when in each team we have different stakeholders, and be it like the team lead or the associate team lead. So everyone we cannot expect a junior designer to like completely oversee things which other people are doing, even though that person is completely they can flag out something which they see that's not working out. But at the end of the day, it's the the lead's call, in my opinion, to oversee things if what their team is doing. And even if some other teams, if that from a designer's perspective, if we ship it off to someone else, if we ship it off to the devs, and if you see some a diversion is happening from their side, so it should be more like like two-way discussion. Like if they see like something which has come from our end, from designers end, it's not it's something different from the design system, they can flag it out to us, and same as vice versa, in my opinion. So it can be, and it has to be a two-way street, and it always falls onto the in the team leads and the and their responsibility in the KRs and OKRs, that this is you should be the gatekeeper of what goes out and what comes in, like.
Yeah, good points.
Yeah, adding to what he said, basically, since it's a collaborative effort between designers and developers, they work hand in hand to get out the design system, right? So, in that case, on the designer side, whosoever is working on the design system, basically the design owners for the design system, should make sure that a scrutiny check is done before the designs are rolled out for development, right? Because usually how we at Zeta follow it is because we have a grooming session where designers are also involved, when a product manager basically grooms things to the developers for building, right? So before that, me being one of the persons working on the design system, we make sure that whatever has been done, let's say 4 people are owning the design system as a gatekeeper, or as you mentioned, like we have OKRs for our own design system as a project, right? So in that case, it is the like responsibility of 4 of us to make sure everything that has been done on, let's say, one particular screen is an inherent component or an inherent design from the components or the brand guidelines that have been designed and kept in the design system. That can be done on the design side, but from the dev side also, how at least the devs I work with on the design system do, they make sure, so they have storybook kind of an approach, right?
Yeah.
So they have tools inbuilt connected to it, which helps them to basically analyze wherever developers have not used a component which is coming from the storybook. So things like this, it has to happen as an ownership from both the sides, be it a designer or a developer, so that end result, what a consumer consumes in the product, is actually a complete component which is consistent and a product out of a design system. So that is how at least we at Zeta try and do things.
Right, right. Great points. I would also think that when you start with a design system, maybe it's a small organization. So, I mean, we all have very good points on the governance models, but there is also this thing that it should evolve, because we can't stick with just one model. Maybe this organization is growing and we are adding more and more product teams um, um, to adopt the design systems, right? So it might help that governance models keep evolving, right? Okay, anything else? Yeah.
So whatever point were covered, I think they covered everything. Just one thing I would like to add is documentation plays a huge role for design systems, for developers to always fall back if they find any inconsistency or something. So I think yeah, documentation plays a huge role from design team side, and it is a big help for the developers or front end developers who are working on the designs. Yeah, that's one thing I just wanted to add.
Totally agree on that. Uh,
It has to be like that. The design system that's, it's there. It has to be, if not lack of a better word, the Bible of it, right? It has to be followed in that way. And in case someone is changing, it's, if something has to be changed, it's not that on whims and fancies of someone, like, okay, it's not looking good and let's just like take a liberty and do it. If something has to be changed, a process has to be followed, other teams, other stakeholders has to be involved, and then we can change if a change is required. And again, changing for the sake of changing should be barred, in my opinion.
Okay, so moving on to the next topic, we would love to talk about platforms and framework support. So first, starting with a question more on the design side, how do you handle differences across different platforms, and what is your process to ensure design consistency while respecting platform conventions? I think we'll let the designers answer this one first.
So since I work on a B2C product, right, it's more of a mobile consumer application for users. So it has to be built out and rolled out for Android and iOS users also. So which is where platform comes in. So ideally, as a iOS user, we are more used to scrolling things because of the interaction that human interface guidelines basically provide, right? Which is not possible or is a constraint for Android. So that is where we have to think through places where things can differ for a Android user and for an iOS user, but at the end what the user sees has to be consistent, be it Android or iOS. Like I am not working on more of a product for web product today, but from a consumer side or from a B2C mobile application, it's more like consistent experience should be there, but the interaction or the way I navigate through user flows can differ, because there are things which Android specifically offers and there are things which iOS specifically offers. And considering we are in India, India is more for Android users as compared to iOS users, right? So this is one thing that we also had as a problem statement. Basically, I work on a fintech application, which is a competitor to Google Pay, Phone Pay, Cred, and all of these, right? So tap and pay is one feature which is not available for iOS users particularly, because there's no NFC support. And we had to cater to that experience where things had to be now different for an Android user who has an NFC support on his device to the users who don't have NFC support on their devices. And that is where we had to like make things look different visually also on one of the key screens of the product. So that is how we'll have to cater to needs of the user and from the what is actually supported by a particular platform and whatnot. So that is how we actually solve.
So do these differences or similarities, whatever the need may be, do they become part of the design guidelines, style guides, or
It
at
does
what
become a
point?
part of
Yeah.
the style guide when it comes to motion design, basically. So our design system also has a extensive motion design guideline, which specifies that, let's say, when you scroll in an iOS mobile, when you there is a jump animation. Like, I think most of the iOS users might have experienced that, which is not present in our Android application. So things like this are actually catered in our motion design guidelines itself, because certain things have to be accounted for a better user experience if I'm on an iOS platform or if I'm on an Android platform. So basically, let's say a simple back interaction that I do, that also as an experience differs on an Android user for an Android user and an iOS user, right? So we do have those things mentioned in our design system, be it as a part of documentation or as a part of the motion design guideline, because that is where the major difference comes in,
Yeah.
for us at least.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Arijit.
Yeah. So, in in your story, so we don't have like a product as such, an application or some like that. But since past several months, we were in the process of revamping the the website of your story, and it was a huge process where we were implementing the design system in terms of because it's a media based website, and each day around 7 to 10 to at least 15 articles they pop up from different journalists and from writers, and those are consumed by, like, many thousands and many, almost a million of people, and they actually read through with either on their mobiles, or on the mostly on the mobiles, or on desktop some. So but yeah, the traction is there in mostly in terms of mobile first. So thing is that the problem which we were facing is in terms of how to make it different, how to make it interesting, so that people actually read and scroll through the content, and go through the articles that we are pushing and publishing. So that's where we not just in terms of product designers, but also graphic designers and illustrators also come into picture to build something, a cohesive product in terms of thinking how to create a hook in terms of, so that a feature image of an article. So if for example, if I just have to take an example, recently, not so recently, all of you must have heard that Zomato's green fleet was cancelled, right? Dipinder Goyal announced publicly on Twitter, and again, just within a day or two, he cancelled it. So that was a huge thing. So again, to design a particular feature image for that, what's the hook? Because 10 other players in the market, they are doing it already. But how do you ensure that your design, your article gets that click through your design, right? And through your the way you are building it. So that's where we try to either through interactions, or either through the way that in mobile, how much ratio of the feature image is going to be, and how much ratio of the body text is going to be, how much ratio of the heading text is going to be. So those components we see, and we have to we keep in mind while actually deploying it, while designing it. And if you are making an illustration out of it, how the which are the primary colors are going to be, so which color attracts more eye, because while scrolling we have so many different images popping off, but in that what colors actually makes your thumb stop. So those kind of things and those kind of design thinking that actually goes on, and we try to create something like that in that
Right,
sense.
right. Yeah.
So I'd like to add to what both of you mentioned. So uh, interaction guidelines is something we also follow. Um, Talking more on the terms of handling different platforms, that's kind of a problem that also exists for us at Razorpay. We have, like, again, web, mobile, both applications. The way we have kind of handled is, for us it's like, uh, for the design system, our devs and designers work very collaboratively. So we always try to draw inspiration from both the sides. So for example, imagine that nothing exists on design. How would you handle it on code? uh, it was pretty much easy. Like, if I talk in terms of React, you could put a context provider, and that will handle all your media queries and everything at the top. Now, something of that sorts didn't exist on Figma until the Figma modes and the Figma variables got released, right? The moment it got released, we draw the parallels from the dev side to the Figma side. Now, the way we extended that was that, again, how do we make the lives of our designers easy? So everyone wants to design for it. The problem is the friction, right? Now imagine a designer was designing a web. All of a sudden you ask them that, you need to fit everything in a mobile view, and they have to redesign it. Similarly, converting a dark mode to a light mode, like, these are the common problems that when we do surveys, they commonly pop up from our designers. Now, these are all of these things are pretty much solved on code. But with Figma, after the modes and the variables got released, we immediately moved to that, and now it's very easy. Guidelines is one where, we have typography that is defined for desktop as well as mobile, and again, different screen sizes. So now we have tied it to, let's say, modes. So the moment you switch the mode, it's as easy as, like, everything would just reflect the moment you apply that mode. Same goes for light mode and dark mode. So now it's pretty much easier, where now we are not talking about that you say, uh, this is my light mode and this is my dark mode. You could have different light and dark modes across your pages by just adding modes to different frames. And the similar can be drawn on the code side, where you could just wrap that part of the page into a context provider. So we keep on coming back and drawing parallels from design to dev and dev to design.
Yeah, I agree. It's nice to have all these new features on Figma. And really good points, everyone. And anything from our audience on this topic? Yeah, Meenu?
I wanted to ask, like, you handle all the platforms at Razorpay. How do you handle, like, as she said, like, interactions are different on iOS and Android. How do you handle that and Razorpay?
Yeah. So I'll give an example, like, not specifically Android or iOS, but to give you an example of a modal, right? A modal component is usually, like, as a design guideline, we have said that on larger screen devices you would use modal. The moment you switch to a smaller screens, it would just get turned into a bottom sheet, because that's more accessible, right? Now, what we have done is, like, we have designed both the components, and now we have attached it to a mode, which is desktop and mobile. So the moment, say, a designer, they drag and drop a modal on a desktop frame, and they say the mode is desktop, it will be like my modal. The moment it is used in a, say, on mobile device, it will just show a message that probably you need to drag and drop another component, which is bottom sheet, because they also differ a lot. For example, on a modal, you have a larger real estate, so you would have different things. On bottom sheet, you have different interactions. For example, a close button, or tapping out, or draggable, right? Those are the sort of interactions that you have. So this is the first level of differentiation. The second level, between iOS and Android, because Figma is mostly a mock tool, and we can't yet do the interactions which could differ. So that kind of differentiation, of course, we have to do it via documentation. that okay, on iOS and Android you could do something like that, but at a screen differences we kind of design different components and then keep them different and then make it like very much intuitive for our consumer designers that hey, probably you are switching a mode, so this component is not meant for web, and it will automatically, like if you try to render a say a modal on a smaller screen size, it will automatically get converted to like a slot which says please use like a bottom sheet component over here. So we try to handle it that way.
Yep, I think next we this one is a bit on the tech side. Talking about web, if let's say it's a large organization and there are different teams working with different frameworks like React, Angular, Vue, or whatever. So, do you think it's a good idea to have your component library for all these different frameworks, or as I was talking about web components earlier? And that has improved a lot. So, uh, do you have any thoughts on these?
So again, yes, if you have a use case, like for us, we just had use case for web and native, and again, native was React Native. So we built like our design system is compatible for React and React Native. But yes, if you do have a use case of having different frameworks, uh, now you could again, depending on how different they are, and if you need another abstraction which is web component, then you add styling on top of it. Of course, you can go with that. I don't see a problem with that. So yeah.
Yeah. So I think I already said that I was the project that I'm working on currently. We are using web components for our component library for web everywhere. Like on React, we are creating wrappers. So we are using Lit framework for web components, and it gives you really nice wrappers to wrap those components for React. For that to be integrated easily. Otherwise, web components are compatible everywhere. It's just simple HTML. You can think of it as just normal HTML elements. But yeah, those wrappers really help, and I could just have that wrapped component in React, and it will give me all the typings for props as well. And I think that's really good, really cool to have. And I'm seeing some design systems now, they are mostly on the website, they use web components. So something to uh, look up to, I guess.
Clarity again.
And again, this is something tech focused. So how do you ensure good performance for a large scale design system, considering factors like component library size and rendering performance? Um, and also like best practices for each platform, if there are any.
Yeah. So I think it all depends on how good of an infra setup you have invested in. So to give an example, performance again could be at different levels. First and the foremost, which is like very basic, that your library should not bloat up consumer applications. Now that involves multiple ways. That are you bundling your entire library and shipping it, or like do you have like a better tree shaking optimizations done? So of course, having tree shaking is always preferable. So the first thing is have those checks in your CI where like the way we do it is that on every PR we have like a list of all the components where the like the component size we have kind of set a threshold, and we also make sure that let's say if you're including 2 or 3 components in a application, your application is only including the components of that and not the entire library. So again, we have like a CI check that checks that. So every PR or a new component, every PR that gets merged first goes through that CI check. So that is a very basic thing. Second, we have storybook interaction test, which now we are moving away from, and now we are moving to uh, playwright setup where we are exploring how we can have like a playwright setup that could run across different grids of devices and different platforms. So that way we can then check across all these interaction level problems, or let's say if the frames are lagging or we have a delayed animation, so those things. So two levels of things that I could talk about.
Yeah, yeah. And about pre-shaking, I agree. We do have that as well. And I would also say the component library, and I think Arijit also mentioned pattern library. So I would say don't bundle everything in your component library. Some larger pieces. I think this is kind of debatable. Some kind of complex components, I think they should be part of pattern library. So you just provide some code snippet, and users can just use those, maybe, because you can't build everything as a component in a component library
Yeah, that's true.
for to avoid bloating.
And I think another thing is, like, let's say if you are building a new component or anything in your system, and when you look for solutions which are available on npm, like for some functionalities, right? uh, you should also have, let's say, a checklist for those libraries. Like we have an internal checklist that we go through, for example, how customizable it is, how much bloat it is adding, is it maintained or not maintained, how much, like how many open security vulnerabilities exist on those libraries. So these are like 3-4 factors that we also account for once, let's say, if we are using a third party library for achieving some functionalities.
Yeah. Do you guys have anything to add? I mean, still, yeah. Okay. So moving on, let's talk about design tokens. So Kamlesh was already mentioning Figma variables. So I think that's a good way to define your design tokens now. But before that, everyone had different solutions to the same problem. So do you guys want to talk about that? Astha, maybe you go first.
So for us, design tokens, even though Figma has given us variables, it is still a problem because we work on a product which is actually a base and an entry point to another product which has a completely different look and feel to it as well. So at one time, that is when we also came across that Figma just supports 4 themes at one time, even though you define tokens which are similar for most of your component library, right? But when you switch your app entirely from a light mode to a dark mode, it won't give you that feature because in one mode only you have 4 different themes to work on. But design tokens has already helped us achieve that basic level of consistency in all our products all our components, because now when I use it to create a component, I am using just the variables that I've defined. I'll not use something else which is not going well, or it might go well when I basically go ahead and design it, right? So because of variables and tokens, it becomes easy for us to collaborate with devs also, because they also have to put in hex codes everywhere, and writing down hex codes for everything and having design tokens, he can add in better as a developer as well, because design tokens will help them also create a token library on their side, which will in turn help us have a consistency across the product. But again, Figma does give a lot of limitations today as well, but we have to live with it. So to how to solve that problem, because dark mode and light mode has to support 4 themes altogether for the entire app, we have actually come up with 2 different like a branch of our existing design system which supports our dark mode as well. So that is how we created tokens on the dark mode side of the thing, because it's not a mirror as how Atlassian design system, for example, does. They actually mirror their palettes when it switches from a light mode to a dark mode. But since we support themes in one mode itself, it becomes a big problem statement for us. But it is helping at some sort, because now if I have to change my primary 20 to primary 60 of another palette, it is easy because I have components or tokens in place, by variables in place.
No, adding to what she said, right? Like, it's important that while designing a token, it's always have some sets of parameters in the clear in the very beginning, so that it doesn't cause any problem in the later stage of it. Because right now, while we are working on the on the revamping of the website, we didn't right now we are not delving into the dark mode yet, but that is down in the for the next quarter. but I'm sure that's going to be a problem which we will be tackling in different interval. But yeah, for the developers, defining things at the very beginning from our side, from a design perspective, I think from what I have also found is that it becomes very easy if we define the tokens at the very beginning in terms of what kind of hex codes and what if we and what the corner radius of a button, for example, is going to be. So those kind of small things, if if we are using some icon library, so what's the thickness of an icon going to be and all those things. So those things, and at the very beginning, if we define it, it will be better for not just us as a designer, whoever is designing it, but for the developers as well.
So for token side, I think I'm very much interested on your use case. We had a similar use case, but we didn't had like extensive themes. We did had use case where again we deal with a lot of different variety of products as well, and there was one product where marketing team, of course, wanted to experiment, and to a point it was coming out that we have two sorts of primary colors, and then we had to sit down and speak with them and define that you can't, like, primary is just one color, you can't have two different colors, and then we had to come up with a different terminology so that it can also work in dark mode. um, Coming to how tokens help designers or developers, what we have done is that, again, for us, we have one mission or a vision, which is what you see in design is what you get in code, and whatever we do, we kind of stick to that. So talking about tokens, we have written like an internal plugin, which anytime, let's say, our designer, they change the color of the any of the token, they can just run the plugin, and that plugin would just go through all the variables, raise a PR on GitHub, it will pass all the checks, and as a developer we just need to just merge it. So now creating tokens, updating tokens is like a very easier task for us. Like we recently went through like a brand refresh exercise where majority of the problems were solved at the design itself. Like all we had to do was like sort out what the new values or new tokens are and what they map. Like it was also like a restructure of our tokens. And in the end, all we had to do was run a plugin. It will just raise a PR and see if anything is broken. If no, then just go ahead and merge it. So that's how we are defining it.
Yeah, that's a really good point about having a source of truth of design tokens, because you need to consume the same tokens in design as well as your code components. So yeah, I think we also have a popular plugin called by Token Studio, Figma tokens, right? So you don't use that. You have created somewhat your own plugin which kind of does the same thing, right?
Yeah, it's more customized because there were certain use cases that the Token Studio were not handling, probably because of the structure that we are following internally, and the kind of structure that we maintain on code. So that's the reason we kind of wrote an internal plugin.
By structure, do you mean like non-standardized design token structure?
No,
Because
not
if you're
non-standardized, but mostly on the side of, say, Token Studio would kind of give me variable to JSON. But now from JSON to, let's say, how it will map to my code, what types it will pick. So those kind of things were not handled. And tokens, like we had written this plugin, like I think at the beginning, which was like 4 years ago. At that time, Token Studio was still like, in a very early phases. So, and that plugin is working well for us. So we didn't switch to Token Studio yet.
yeah, right. So any questions from our audience? Any other points to add? No. Okay. So coming to multi-brand design systems, there are a lot of challenges there. As I was saying, when we have a lot of different kinds of brands under the same organization, how do you have it all under a single design system, or do you think it shouldn't be a single design system in that case?
This is the exact same problem statement that I just talked about, where one app has 4 different themes. I'm not talking about modes, I'm talking about themes. Now, based on that theme, my primary color changes because there is a check that has to be applied to change that primary color. Now we also were in a spot where we had to decide whether we should like come up with two different design systems, one which is completely handling one set of things and the other which is handling the four themes wala bit, right? But what we did, we instant just created a duplicate. When I talk about on the Figma side of the things, right, we just branched out the entire design system and we created a duplicate of it where we basically handled just the dark mode side of the things. So original design system was handling the light mode bit, supporting all the four themes, but the duplicate that we did was handling the same logics of be it tokens, be it the way my components are designed, and anyways the patterns and everything was actually consistent for one thing itself. Like because patterns you can't keep on changing, just the look and feel will change if you switch your mode from light and dark, right? So that is where we also evaluated and came to a conclusion that one design system is what will work irrespective. You have to support multiple themes in different modes, right? So because my foundation remains same, it's just my color palette which changes with the brand identity, and it keeps on revolving around my brand identity with respect to just colors. My typography remains same. The spacing that I follow in light mode or in anything remains same, right? Because all of my other building blocks of design are consistent except my color palette. So which does not actually conclude to a fact that you come up with just like multiple design systems, because it's a increase in effort for both designers and developers, because once we design the design system they have to in turn build it and use it in their day-to-day work, right? So hence we came up with just one design system, but the way the token handling was done was changing from, and when I say tokens, just colors, that's it. So that is how we tackled that possible problem statement.
Right, really good point. I think I agree that if it's just the color palette, it is the same design system.
Yes.
If your foundations remain the same, it is a single design system. So I mean, yeah, there could be cases where different brands have somewhat different foundations under an
Right.
organization. Like I'll give an example of let's say button can have three sizes in one design system for one brand.
Correct.
The other brand, this team says that no, we need five sizes of buttons, and there are use cases for that. So do you reconcile these across different brands in a designs if in a multi-brand design system, or do you think we should find a way to kind of figure this out, how to support multiple sizes of buttons?
Right. So if I answer to answer the question, so if it is a mobile app, first we'll have to reevaluate if we really need to add two more added button sizes, right? Because when it comes to a mobile application, you have to restrict on the number of different buttons that you have in a entire product. But to answer the question of actually handling different things, so we at Zeta have two design systems. One is basically for the B2C products, and the other is for the B2B SaaS products, because my platforms and my entire product changes. When I say B2B SaaS, it's more like a web application. It's more like a dashboard that is being developed. So now everything will change when I work on a B2C product and when I work on a B2B SaaS product, right? Because I cannot use 12 pixel on a B2B on a dashboard, which I can use on a mobile app, right? So that is where the difference comes in, and we support two different design systems. One which is catered to just the dashboards or the B2B sides of the products that we work at Zeta, and the other one is which is completely aligned towards the B2C bit. But again, because things foundation will still remain consistent in n number of products that we build, we support one design system for B2C only. And similar
Yeah.
thing happens at B2B as well.
Yeah, right.
So I think what she mentioned is correct. So I would I always try to break it at a level of, say, so at Razorpay as well. So we have B2B set of products. For B2C, we have like a landing page website, which is like used for acquisition of customers. And over there, of course, because marketing team is involved, they come up with all sorts of innovative ideas. But we were also in a similar situation where we were questioning ourselves that do we need a different system that would just cater to the B2C website, or can we can do with the current system itself. For us, what helped was, because we did a lot of questioning, we went back to the drawing board and we said, okay, fine, these are our semantics, right? What could change? So the delta of what could change was very minimal. And then we did a reverse engineering that, let's say if we accommodate these use cases into our current system, if say our B2B products use it, what could go wrong? And the answer was nothing. Like, for example, imagine that you are a customer, you go to a razorpay.com website and you see a certain look and feel. The moment you sign up, and then let's say you want to, let's say, integrate a payment gateway for your business or something. Once those payments are done, you have like a admin portal, which is like where you manage all your payments, right? Now, the product that you saw versus what you are now seeing at an admin portal, if that would differ, that would create a disconnect. So for us, that was the answer, and that was a trigger. But the to answer a question precisely, if your semantics remain same, the example that you mentioned, that one of the brand needed 2 extra size of button, I would always question, let's say, if you really need those size of button, why not add to a system? And let's say, instead of maintaining a system, because we all know that maintenance of a system is a big overhead, right? And it leads to a lot of chaos. And if it's just mostly the size of buttons, to me, design system is always a superset, and then different products could infer different things. But there are, let's say, a lot of brands which are completely different. For example, let's say a Dior from a Louis Vuitton, right? They could completely differ. Now, there could be cases where they can't have the semantics same as well. When I say semantics, um, say, if I talk in terms of tokens, you would say that, okay, I have a title and a heading, and then let's say a body text. But the values could be different, like the type, the font family that you choose could be different. But now, if let's say you're in a situation where you say, a title, heading, and let's say a body text, this scale is not sufficing for, let's say, a different brand, and you need, let's say, a wider options. But if you add it to a system, the first brand might get affected and you don't want them to use it. So that is where you kind of take a decision that, okay, if you add it to, let's say, a global, what could go wrong? And if the delta is very small and you could take that trade off, of course, go with a single system. But if they are really different on a very semantic level, then of course you don't have an option apart from having two different systems. Then it would just become like you're retrofitting things, and both of these brands would fail.
Yeah. No, I agree about finding the differences between semantics. Uh, but yeah, to add to that, where the project I am working on right now, it is exactly kind of facing the same thing, that yeah, there are wildly different brands and they want the same system. Now, we have come up with two sets of abstractions, like core foundations and brand foundations. So a shared set of foundations still remain the same across different brands, but there is like brand foundations, you can say, which kind of add their own thing on top of that. And we also generate even different component libraries for each team. So even on the development level, if you see, as I was giving an example of different sizes of buttons, so even the typings for the props in the button, it will give you those proper typings for different teams. So one team will get small, medium, large, another will get extra small and extra large as well. So I think there are ways to do that, but you really have to think about it, whether that is something you want.
I think like at the when we are dealing with multi-brand problem statement. So there's one overarching umbrella, that is the brand, right? And there are different brands under that umbrella. So if we if we define something which is constant of that larger umbrella in terms of for example, typeface, right? And that is, so for example, if I take an example for your story, we have different around 6 to 7 different brands under brand your story. So how we differentiate is like we keep the typeface Bebas Noya for all of them. In terms of if you're using, let's say a logo piece of the, the logo mark, it has to be Bebas Noya, so that it's it's different. The typeface remains same, the color changes, and same across, like, each of the different brands has their own different web page and own different set of interactions. So typefaces remain same, color changes little bit, but overall, if you look at it, it should feel it's a part of the same design system, part of the same user's design system, and it shouldn't be something like complete different entity altogether. So some basic parameters has to be constant, and rest we can take some liberty onto it. So some foundation has to be constant altogether for the whole brand and itself.
Yeah, I agree. Some brands are like, under an organization you have like homogeneous brands, kind of sub brands you can say. So they still maintain an identity of overall like kind of parent brand, but still a different uh, sub brand maybe. So yeah. Okay, I think that's all we have for the first panel discussion. We are running out of time. So finally, I think we can take some questions from the audience if there are any. Otherwise, we can just take a break.
So it's for designers and developers both. So inside a product, when there is an existing component, or let's say there's a component that needs to be designed from scratch. So let's first talk about when there is a particular UI component, there are some small changes that is required from design and as well as developers, and because some new feature came in and we want to include some new features. So how do designers approach it in your companies, and then how do developers approach, and how do designers and developers collaborate in this process, like including a new interaction? We can talk about tables, for example. We can talk about audio player, let's say, or any new component we can take. If a new component has to be documented and created from the designs system side, and then it will go eventually on the dev front end, and it has to be created there. So what's the process for it to being designed and developed both?
Speaking from Razorpay's current process, for us, as I mentioned, our design and dev, we have a common team where even our sprints are run together. So when, let's say, a new feature or something has to be picked up, they go hand in hand. It's like a backend, typical backend or front end kind of a environment where backend would lead, and in this case, backend is design. So the designer would lead the development. Once all those things are done, it will go to a handoff to dev, and that happens at the same time in one cycle. uh, like, let's say if today a designer picks up an enhancement of a existing component, or let's say a new component, the moment they finish up, they immediately hand it off, and let's say a very next sprint or day, the developer would pick it up. So we do our planning in such fashion. So let's say if there's a new enhancement that is to be picked up, and let's say the planning of next sprint starts tomorrow, both the designer and dev would sit, and then we'll estimate the days, and basis that we'll estimate such that the first designer would do it, and if it, let's say, is not, if it's going beyond one sprint, then the next sprint the developer would accommodate that task, but it goes in one shot. So that's the process that we follow.
So something like this, when it comes up, right? The first thing that we question is like, is it necessary, or is it something we cannot, it can be just omitted if it's not fitting in the longer run of things. So just for argument's sake, let's say if we say that it is something which a component which we are to be built, which is very necessary to the in the longer picture. So only then and then only that we design takes it up, and of course, of first initial discussions with project managers and everything. So design team takes it up, and then we pass it on to the development team. So same process mostly. Designer takes it up. The whole design team collaborates and how it's going to fit in the larger picture, so that it doesn't stand. It's not like it's a sore thumb standing out. It's fits into the design system well, and then we ship it off to the development team and they integrate it. But the main thing, we started off with, like, we question it, and we have, like, a thorough discussion, like, do we really need it, and how is it actually going to help? Is it going to increase the engagement rate? If yes, then how? If is it going to gather more clicks? If yes, then how? If not, then so we do a lot of these open-ended discussions. So even if before actually going to the drawing board, so we do like a thorough, there's lots of discussion happening, even if just small component has to be added. So that we found it has helped a lot. That many time it happens, someone thinks that it's going to be helpful, but actually when we get a lot of perspective from other stakeholders, right, not just from design or development, but other people who are also involved, sales and other people, so their perspective comes in, then we actually see that, okay, this is something from our creative perspective, we think it will look cool, so just for the sake of looking cool we shouldn't add it. So then we follow this process like that.
The process that we follow is pretty much similar as to how both of them have mentioned. But even before the designer actually picks the component to be designed, there is a proper series of conversations that happen and discussions that happen between the dev and the design team to basically evaluate whether that component is supposed to be registered as a component in the design system or not. Let's say my team came up with a design for one particular screen, but that is not a reusable thing on other screens inside the product. That dilutes the fact of actually registering it as a component in the design system, because if it is a screen specific thing and not a scalable thing that is going to be used across the screens, that and there and then it is not picked up as a component building process also at Zeta. So basically, if it is more of a reusable component, only then it qualifies to be designed and developed as a part of the design system. And then the process is pretty similar as to how Razorpay also follows, where we first give a series of days estimation, that this is how much time we'll take as a design team or a designer to come up with the component. Then we'll do a set of grooming with the developers, understand if there are any constraints or problems that might occur when they're going to develop it, or any questions that they have, right? Be it interaction related. So let's say I created a component and I gave us a step like a documentation which was not aligning to the way it could have been developed, right? A hypothetical situation. That is where the grooming session actually helps, and we come up with a middle ground where, okay, if this interaction is not going to be supported on one particular platform, why not come up with something which is platform agnostic, right? So that is how we do it, and then it goes into development. Once it is developed, it comes back to us for a design sign off. So that is how the entire process of, irrespective a new component is to be designed or if an existing component is being enhanced further. So until and unless the design team does not give a sign off, it is not shipped to the, like, it is not merged as a PR in the design system project itself. So that is how the basic process at Zeta for a component building works.
Thank you.
you know the release also goes hand in hand. Like, for example, a design is done, and let's say a dev is immediately started, but let's say a dev is going to take, let's say, a week or 2 weeks of effort. Meanwhile, we can't publish that component, because what if a fellow designer, they start consuming it, then it would create a lot of chaos. So the release happens once the dev is complete, even on Figma. So our releases go hand in hand as well.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Just to add to what Asta said, so if you think a component is not reusable component, like whatever you follow at Zeta is different, but do you think if it's not a reusable component, for example, if there is a tab set which is used in a certain screen, or there is a video player which is used in a certain screen itself, then you think that should be included in the design system or not?
If I talk about that particular component, let's say you talked about tabs, right? If I already have an existing component, in a way, I've been using tabs across my product, and it is a component in the design system itself. First question, being a design system person, to the designer who designed a new tab would be, why cannot you use the existing tab structure? If the argument is valid and what he or she brings onto the table is true, and we need to support that, then we'll bring it. Otherwise, it will be a local component for that entire screen itself, because components on Figma helps you define the interaction patterns along with it, right? So if it is a screen specific component that we need to cater to, the entire thing is done local to that particular screen or that particular module itself. It is not registered in the design system. It is not published as a component from a dev and a development side, design side, from the design system itself. So that is how it's more like a local thing that happens, and it is locally developed also by the developer itself. It's a extra component person.
So talking about local components, I also have one other question. So in a company where only one design system is being used and the company has multiple products, so where the same design system is being used again, now a specific product has a component,
Okay.
right? But that specific product only has it. It has nothing to do with, let's say, other 4 or the 5 products. So how would you guys document it? Would you want it to be in the design system, or would you want it to be specifically exist in that product as a part of design system? Like, what would be that process?
So basically, if that component, if it is respective to one particular product in my company, right? Or let's say for anybody, how we'll approach it is, if we know that is a reusable component, it will be a part of the design system, because it will follow all the foundation level variables and tokens as well. But if it is something that is used in that particular product only at one screen or two screens maximum, it will be a local component. That is how that thin line is maintained. It's a very thin line, I agree, but that is where it is maintained. If it is used across 10, 20, 30 screens, it should be a part of the design system. The design system should leverage it. But if it is only specific to two screens, it has to follow the foundation design system, but it has to be a local component in that case.
For us, the way we maintain this is we have a repository on Figma. It's a Figma file which we call it as snowflakes. So whenever these kind of use cases pop up, where it's, let's say, the component is mostly designed for that particular product, it goes into that snowflake. So if in the future some other product might see a use case, they first go to design system. If they don't find it, they go to snowflake. If it's in snowflake, then we start discussions that, okay, if it is being used multiple times, then probably we can move it to design system. Otherwise, they can just use it from snowflakes. So that's like a repository that we maintain of snowflake components. So that also,
So it's like another file.
it's a different file, yes. So of course the rules apply there as well, that even if you're building a custom component, you have to use the foundations or tokens of the system itself. But you can of course have like one-off use cases where the decision again would come, where you start questioning and brainstorming what she mentioned, that why you can't use this as a component, and why is there a need. After all those decision has been made, if it's truly a use case where it has to be a custom component for that product, it goes to that snowflake file.
I think so. One of the problem that we are facing at our organization is that a lot of custom components which are being repetitively used in that specific project or product a lot, but then if we involve them into the main design system file, it's getting extremely bloated. So yeah, so that's one of the problem, and I feel maybe we can have some other file. Us, we are like brainstorming on how to solve this. Yeah.
I think what Kamlesh said, I'll maybe call that as a pattern library, right? Because
For example, we had like to give you an example, we had progress bar as a component. Okay, we had different variants of progress. Like we started with, let's say, a linear progress bar. There was a use case of circular progress bar initially, but that was just used for just one project. The way this helped, like again, it's a component, not a pattern per se. So the way this snowflake thing helped us was, we kind of put it as a snowflake for that particular project because we didn't want it to block. And at that time, we didn't had a use case. But later on, there was few more projects. When they moved ahead, they found that as a need, and that's where now that circular progress bar is now a variant of our actual progress bar, and now it is moved to a system. So this repository kind of also helps the design system team to keep a tap at, okay, what other teams are trying to do. So
I think that makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
So
Just
yeah,
one
yeah, sure.
Okay, so this is completely different from what the discussion we were having. So considering the case that GeekyAnts is having its own design system, which is GlueStack, right? And we are having multiple external projects also. So if we are planning to use that particular design system in other projects, and say the case that any of the client is having a particular brand guideline, right? They have their own colors and typography, which we are easily able to change in GlueStack. That's one case. But again, as I asked Arijit also, that for example we have certain edges or certain type of curves which we define in. So what do you prefer, like do we change the design system, like that's not the case that we'll change the design system completely, or we should be creating different style guide for those projects, or how should we going about that design system, because that will be of completely no use. Because if I defined a certain kerning, that will go in buttons, that will go in text field, that will go everywhere. If we are using any images or modal, everything. If we are using sharp, they will be sharp. If we are using curves, they will be curves. So will that design system be of any use when it comes to different projects, or how should we moving ahead with it? Should we be creating a separate style guide only for that particular project, or how should we going about it?
so the way like my preference would be that, again, what I was talking to Himanshu about, maintaining different brands, right? If your tokens are same, I would recommend to probably have a different token collection, and but still use the same component set. Now, just to give you an example of what you were mentioning about the sharp edges versus a blunt edges, right? So let's say a token which is talking about the type of border radius, either it could be sharp or blunt, right? Now, because your this semantic is fixed, you could clone your current token collection and then modify it as per the brand. But again, you can still apply it to your existing component set and everything would just work. So making like maintaining different, say, token collection would be better rather than maintaining a different system, like cloning the existing system, because cloning the system is a problem. Because let's say if you push an update which is a very base level update, because Figma doesn't allows you to say have a base library and then you can inherit from different things, which we can do on code, of course. So we were also in that similar situation. The way you can do it is that you have components which are just single source of truth as of component, and then you can have token collection which could vary from your brand to brand. The moment you just change the token collection, your existing component could just work. So if you are trying to make a change in button spacing, right, the left and right or the top and bottom spacing, you don't have to now remember that, okay, I have 8 or 10 different clients, I have to now percolate this or replicate this change across, which is a huge tedious process. We used to have that. This was before the era of variables, but I think now with variables things are very much easier.
So in simple terms, like creating the design system using the variables and defining the tokens completely. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's leave something for the second panel also. I think we had a really good discussion. So a round of applause for everyone.